And here we go. So also we want to, Rav Yitzchak, Fivish, Ben Brian, and Malka should have refuah shalema and go to from strength to strength, since he is our teacher, our Rabbi, who we've learned, and our friend. And yes, so Hashem should bless him with outstanding good health. So here we are. We miraculously started chapter 8 last week. We did the first page and a half, so we'll review. So we're on page 91 for the lucky people who have our text. Then you can read along with me. Okay, so the chapter is basically called Hasidis versus conventional psychology. In case your friend stops you in the street and asks, what's the difference from what you're learning and conventional psychology, we're going to sum up the answer. So before I read this first paragraph, I'm going to tell you what it says in the spirit of telling people what you're going to teach them and then teaching them. And then telling them what you told them. Okay, so basic similarities and differences. So what it's saying is that we observe reality, right? We observe reality and we make empirical conclusions, like we're all little scientists observing reality. And the Torah is also telling us the true nature of reality. So what do we do when there seems to be a difference between the two? This first chapter is addressing this important question. Here we go. We are taught that the Torah is God's blueprint for creation. That is, that he created the world according to the way the world is described in the Torah. That's from Bereshis Rabbah. It's an exciting thought. Can you just, if you try to visualize it, I mean, we can't really visualize these things, but Hashem looked in the Torah, checked out the blueprint there, and created the world. This means that the Torah implicitly contains the deepest and most precise understanding of all aspects of reality, okay? Get that? Please memorize that idea. The Torah contains the deepest and most precise understanding of all aspects of reality. Fascinating. However, not all of this depth is explicit. It's not all revealed easily. Uncovering the Torah's truths is an ongoing process that Hashem has given to us to complete. So it's a lifetime process, discovering the Torah's truth. That's why, we do Tanya Chitas every year, and it gets deeper and deeper. So it's an ongoing process. Now, this process occurs in two directions. On the one hand, we continuously mine the Torah's text and oral tradition for deeper and deeper insights. So we're always mining the Torah for deeper and deeper insights. And so that's on the one hand. On the other hand, we amass empirical data from the observable world and form theories. So we're always, since we were very young, we've been forming theories on how reality works to explain our findings. In order to arrive at a true picture of reality, we see how our empirical findings compare with our Torah understanding, with our understanding of the Torah, or vice versa. Okay, so keep this in mind. The next paragraph will explain more. We have one column, our empirical findings. We have another column, our understanding of the Torah. Now, if we confront an apparent discrepancy, what happens if there's a discrepancy between those two columns? This encourages us to seek an explanation. Oh, I love that. It's a mitzvah to seek an explanation. And as I said, I learned from Y.Y. Jacobson, the Torah is not afraid of questions. Don't you feel much better? That kind of answers 50% of the questions when we find out that the Torah is not afraid of questions. Yes, the Torah is not afraid. And teachers should know that. It's very important. It should be the first class in teaching to know the Torah is not afraid of questions. Okay, so what happens? We found this discrepancy between our two columns. Perhaps our data is incomplete and we have to test the field more thoroughly. We don't have enough data. Or perhaps we have to find a deeper level of understanding in the Torah that will encompass our empirical findings. Get that. We have to find a deeper level of understanding in the Torah that will encompass our empirical findings. We have empirical findings. Okay, let's give an example. The Torah, we saw with our empirical findings. The empirical findings are there's a lot of suffering in the world. Everywhere we look, there's suffering, there's physical suffering, there's emotional suffering. It seems like no one really gets out too easy here. Okay, then on the other hand, the Torah tells us that Hashem is the Av HaRachamim, the Father of compassion. How can I deal with my two columns? I can't figure out how my two columns jive together. So it says we have to get a deeper level of understanding of the Torah that will encompass our empirical findings. So we have to look deeper. We look deeper and we find out that in Rabbi Yitzchak spoke about the Aleph base, each letter has like a 3-word caption. And for Aleph, it's bearing the paradox. The meditation for Aleph is bearing the paradox. It's right there at the beginning. So bearing the paradox transcends logic. There's no way to grasp a paradox with logic. When they first discovered, we've spoken about this before, in the 1920s, when they made all the discoveries in quantum physics, that light was a particle and a wave at the same moment, and that electrons were particles and waves at the same moment. And the human brain can't grasp that because particles and waves are two opposite things with opposite properties. How can it be two opposite things at the same moment? And there were quantum physicists, so they saw that. Till then, they really believed that we could understand everything in nature. And if we didn't understand it this year, we'd understand it next year. And then they found that it wasn't like that. It's just the human mind can't grasp like the essence of reality. And there were those that wanted to just take a gun and end it there. They said, if you study this, so this is bearing. So since we're humbler than those quantum physicists, it takes a certain humility to bear the paradox that our mind, there are things beyond what our mind can understand. So the Torah encourages us to seek an explanation. Perhaps we will have to find a deeper level of understanding in the Torah that will encompass our empirical findings. In this way, Torah study and human inquiry benefit from mutual cross-fertilization. The empirical findings turn the page, and the theories they spawn serve to direct our exploration of the Torah and help us uncover new insights that will encompass them, while the absolute precision of the Torah's worldview directs our interpretation of our empirical findings. So it's all very exciting. All our empirical findings, we're going to see how they can resonate with the Torah. Doesn't that sound like what's a great way to teach science? Also, wonderful, wonderful. We're all little scientists making empirical findings, and we've been doing it since we were born, noting how does reality work? What's going on here? Okay, so that was where we got up to last time. And now we're starting on fresh, new, and exciting material. So this is 92. In any event, the more refined our understanding of any particular discipline or aspect of reality, the more we may expect it to mirror the Torah's view of the same discipline. Nonetheless, as long as the secular discipline does not take into account the existence, presence, and influence of God, this resemblance remains merely superficial. So it's possible to teach every secular discipline with the awareness of the presence and influence of Hashem. Isn't that an exciting idea? And that's how it's actually taught in the Galei schools, even from like first grade, addition, subtraction, it's all connected with the spheros. The presence of God could be taught in every subject. I really enjoyed teaching physics like that at Beis Rivka. It's like fun. It's like Hashem made the laws of physics. What can we learn from our avoda? So we can bring Hashem's presence. And then we know from this many sforim that Rav Yitzchak has written that many secular disciplines can be taught with the presence and influence of Hashem. That's how we're doing it. Okay, modern methods of conventional psychotherapy do, in fact, resemble the Torah-based processes of submission, separation, and sweetening we have been describing. So let me tell you what's coming next. For the first few chapters of this book, we spent a great deal of time speaking about the Baal Shem Tov's three concepts of psychological growth, Hachna'ah, Havdalah, Hamtaka, which are translated as, well, Hachna'ah is translated as submission, but it really means making the ego smaller. Havdalah obviously is separation, and Hamtaka is sweetening. Now, this text is going to show us how these concepts do exist in secular therapy, but on a deeper level, of course, how they exist in Hasidic psychotherapy. Okay, get ready. Conventional psychology's submission phase consists of its extensive preoccupation with limits and boundaries. In the course of therapy, the patient is required to give due attention to the contract between himself and the therapist, which outlines what is appropriate and inappropriate behavior inside and outside of the therapist's office. Accepting these limitations involve a form of submission of Hachna'ah, but there is still a considerable difference in essence between acceding to the rules and truly humbling the ego in recognition of of the greatness and goodness of Hashem. So let's talk about that. We learned about what is the very first stage of Hachna'ah is meditating on the greatness of Hashem, even if it's for 30 seconds, because it means I'm taking my ego out of the center of my consciousness. This is the beginning of healing, that I can take my ego out of and then it's like, it's very humbling for the ego. What am I doing over here by the side of your consciousness? Me, it's all about me. It's sure, the ego is sure, it's all about me. And then to just gently, it has to be instructed, the truly humbling of the ego, that it's not about me, it's about my shlichus. It's not about me, it's so healthy, because when it's about me, it's so painful and horrible and boring. No offense to my ego, of course. I hope it didn't take that as a too crushing blow. Okay, so the greatness, and there's no way we have to be able to meditate at the greatness and goodness of Hashem. And it can be very sure that Hashem creates the world, Hashem is filling the world, Hashem is surrounding the world, Hashem is here with me in the moment in Hashgacha Pratis. Oh, I feel better already. Okay, so that's Hachna'ah. Okay, everyone's got that? Hachna'ah fits in many ways, but we have to get a feeling for what it is. I mean, I don't know what the best English translation, I don't think submission completely gets it. For me, it's like putting the ego aside or making the ego smaller. Because remember, when we make the ego smaller, all that space is filled with Hashem's compassion. It's not like it's empty space. It's Hashem's compassion feels so much better than my poor ego trying to prove that it was right at all costs. I mean, I'm a poor victim of horrible circumstances, which gives me a free pass to do whatever I want. And it's so hard to try to convince it that that's not, it's not about me. Okay, the separation stage, we're moving right along here. Havdalah comes to play in conventional psychotherapy in the dialogue between the therapist and the patient. This is interesting, actually, when the distinction is drawn between those aspects of the patient's psyche which are intrinsic to him and those which originate outside of him. So let's get this idea. And this is true. I mean, this is a very common idea in conventional psychotherapy, and it's also an interesting idea that there are things that are intrinsic to us. There are things in our psyche that originate outside of us. Very often in the course of such a discussion, the patient comes to realize that the negative elements, which he has considered part and parcel of his personality, are in fact external baggage, which have been grafted onto him and which he need not continue to carry. One more sentence and we'll explain. Here the distinction, separation, is made between the patient's true inner self and the outer non-essential crust that encompasses him, that boring non-essential crust that encompasses us. Like someone can think I've always been lazy, and that's the way it is. That's who I am. I've just always been lazy, and that's who I really am, and there's just nothing I can do about it. Nope, that's just crust. That's not the real you. And I've always been impatient. I've just always been impatient. How can you expect me to patiently say these words in davening patiently when I've always been impatient? So it's external crust. As I mentioned last week, I've had the most from a source I don't remember, the idea of, davening each word patiently, even if we daven less, to be able to say each word with patience. I really have found this transformative. So we want to get that so that's something we can get out of conventional psychology. Nevertheless, here we have a paragraph, top of 93. As conventional psychotherapy does not recognize the existence of the divine soul, it is unable to see any redeeming value in the process of separation prescribed by Hasidis. That is, ignoring problems or the past traumas that give rise to them. And we're going to go back over this, for the conventional psychologist, this is, in quotes, repression, end quotes. The psyche's refusal to face its true self and allow the thoughts and impulses buried in the darkness of its subconscious to surface. So we're going to say we're going to talk about the difference between Havdalah. What does it mean to be able to separate from the problem, be able to identify with the divine soul, to know we have a divine soul, chapter 2 of Tanya, and to be able to look at our animal soul, to look at our subconscious, look at us, ourselves from an objective outside viewpoint of the divine soul. This is the separation. When thoughts, impulses, and urges are repressed, they will only fester within the subconscious, eventually to resurface in a much more detrimental form. We've seen that. The submission and separation we have been discussing here are not repressive. Rather, they are conscious efforts to neutralize our exaggerated ego and exaggerated obsessions with our problems. That is unfortunate, our exaggerated obsession. I'm laughing and crying at the same time. Please don't get me wrong. Our exaggerated obsessions with our problems. Hachna'ah, followed by efforts to pursue and focus on good by ignoring evil, separation. Neither of these forms of separation implies denial of our problems or their causes. So we're not trying to deny we have these problems or that they have exciting causes, but we're just trying to step out of them, separate from them. We have the ability to identify with the divine soul and look at them objectively. It's fascinating. My psyche looked at it objectively. Okay. So a couple of points. To leave out the idea of separation and try to go straight to the sweetening, which conventional psychology can try to do. I want to relate that to what we were talking about the last couple of weeks, and it was really in yesterday's Torah reading. So we spoke about Menashe being the firstborn and Ephraim being the second, and Menashe forgetting is the ability to say what was. While Ephraim is being fruitful, it's making all the traumas and everything, the redefining our transgressions and traumas as a catalyst for growth, become more compassionate and less judgmental people. That's the sweetening. That sounds good. But the separation is what was, like to be able to tell, is this happening now or am I reliving it in my mind? The A question. Is this happening now? It's the quiz question for this University of Sanity. We have to be able to determine if this is happening now or I'm just reliving it in my mind. And I'm just making it feel like it's happening now. Okay, so what was is, it takes a lot of effort. It's not a simple thing. I remember my dear friend Hindle, when we were learning this last week, 2 weeks ago, she said, is there, a 5 minutes period of grace when you to get out of it? How was and I was thinking, it's not a period of grace, it's like a period of torture. Do I deserve 5 more minutes? Come on, let me have 5 more minutes to torture myself by feeling it's happening now. Miserable experiences in my life. So what was is the separation. I'm separating what's happening now and what's happened in the past. And then we can go on to the sweetening. Because I remember when Y.Y. Jacobson was teaching the Sikha from the Rebbe, and why it was so upsetting to Yosef when his father put his hand on the younger son, Ephraim, the right hand on Ephraim, which is what we're going for. But Menashe had to be born first. If you ask, why again do we have to have the younger brother being favored over the older brother? Because Menashe, you can't reach the sweetening without the separation. Otherwise, we're just fooling ourselves. Otherwise, we're still stuck. So there has to be that effort of the separation. And it's really just effort. It's like catching it when we get into it. Another round. Another round of tormenting myself, and it's reliving miserable moments. So what was, it's practice, it's absolute practice, and it's seeing we have the ability to do it. And then we can go on to the sweetening. Okay, so we're in the bottom. Also, we have to have in mind that this book, based on the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, is really empowering us to do these things, that we're learning about it. And Rav Yitzchak writing this book, that we're empowered to be able to say what was. Let's make a l'chaim and bless each other, that we should all be able to have great progress in it this week. L'chaim. And could a few more people put on their cameras? Come on, it's social. It's like community spirit, a real Farbrengen. Oh, this is so nice. Look at those nice friends. I'm such a lucky girl. Okay, so we're on the bottom of 93, bottom paragraph. The conventional psychotherapist who attributes no intrinsic value to ignoring a problem will tend to encourage his patients to deal with their psychological problems as soon as possible. He reasons that just as it is best to deal with medical problems as soon as they arise and not ignore them, it is best to deal with psychological problems as soon as they surface. The second stage of the Hasidic system, ignoring anxiety in order to allow the divine soul to manifest itself, cannot therefore be a part of conventional psychotherapy. So I don't know if ignoring is the right word, but I mean, it is a very big deal, because when we're having an attack of anxiety, just to know that it's possible to step out of it, that just to have that knowledge that it's not me, it's I have another identity, my divine soul. I could examine, look at it. It's so exciting to look at one's anxiety. It has physical symptoms. It has racing thoughts. It's a fantastic empirical study. What is anxiety? Okay, so the top of 94. The sweetening phase of conventional psychological therapy is described graphically in the more recent psychological theories, according to which the therapist often plays the role of a mother reflecting back her child's good points. As the good expands in the patient's consciousness, the ailing psyche of the patient is theoretically healed. But as noted above, a frank assessment of an unrectified life will typically reveal that the good points of our personalities are far outweighed by the bad points. That's the unrectified. That's the unrectified life for you. There's a lot of so sad bad points also. This technique is therefore a far cry from true sweetening, an experience of Hashem's infinite light penetrating and permeating all of one's being. The true sweetening. Let's look at that again. And this is what we want. This is what we're moving towards. An experience of Hashem's infinite light penetrating and permeating all of one's being. Yes, let's breathe that in. Let's breathe that in deeply. Hashem's infinite light, that's penetrating and permeating all of one's being, true sweetening. Not just saying that my ego isn't as horrible as I originally thought. It's slightly better. It's a tiny, teeny bit better than truly horrible. I'm convinced. No, that is not the direction. The direction is divine soul, etzem be'etzem. just to point out a few holidays coming our way. This Thursday night, Friday, is Chaf Dalet Teves. It's the Alter Rebbe's Yortzeit. It's a big deal. It's a good time to connect with the Alter Rebbe, learn some Tanya, feel his soul's elevation. I'm planning to go to Menucha Rachel, his granddaughter's kever in Hebron, in Meretz Hashem, in disguise, invisible, during the Segir, the lockdown. So that's, and also tonight is actually, tonight for those who are already, tonight it's the Rambam's Yortzeit, Chaf Teves, so that's exciting. Do your Rambam with an extra flare of joy. And we're already within the month of Basi Lagani, of Yud Shvat. And, it's 20, everyone knows it's 20 chapters, and each year the Rebbe would teach another chapter. And this year is chapter 11, which the Rebbe taught in 1961 in Chaf Aleph. And that's the mimer. And Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson is actually teaching this mimer in 4 parts. He already gave the first 2 this last Sunday and today, and he's going to be giving 2, but it's all recorded. You could hear it. But what made me reminded me to tell you all of this is that he mentioned in the mimer the idea of the etzem of Hashem, Hashem's essence, and the etzem of a Jewish neshama have this etzem to etzem connection. And so when thinking about Hashem's infinite light penetrating and permeating all of one's being, and to have this etzem to etzem connection, which made me think that also with friends, we have etzem to etzem friends. It's very important to have etzem to etzem connections with people, right? We want that. Etzem, then we never have to be lonely if we have etzem to etzem. Essence to essence connections, and to feel Hashem's infinite light penetrating and permeating all of one's being. So this is the true sweetening. I'm going to skip the next paragraph. It's a little technical. And the bottom paragraph here on 94. All the above serves to illustrate the fact that although there appear to be external resemblances between conventional psychology and the process described here, there remains an essential difference. Conventional psychology is limited by the boundaries of the patient's animal soul and the human intellect of the therapist. So the boundary, because that's what it's studying. Conventional psychology is to heal the patient's, we hope, the patient's animal soul, and how smart is your therapist? While the Hasidic therapeutic practices derive their effectiveness from the revelation of the infinite powers of the divine soul and its connection to its divine source. So the revelation, so we have to really get into that revelation of the infinite powers of our Nefesh Elokis. We have to start feeling it. Spend a little time, let the Nefesh Elokis express itself, ask it its opinion, bring it out from hiding. And it has this etzem to etzem connection to its divine source, to Hashem's etzem. It's a big deal. When you learn about the Jewish soul being a part of Hashem's etzem, part of Hashem's essence, and it was like, and I remember Y.Y. Jacobson saying, we're the part of Hashem's essence that had the courage to come down into this world. And that's a big deal. It takes a lot of courage to come down into this world. Unbelievable. So we're shluchim for Hashem's light and love in this world. And we're so brave. Look at all these brave people that have their cameras on, for example. Come on, more people, be brave. We came down into this world. See, that was encouraging. Is it all just girls here tonight? That girl, I like the all girl classes, just us girls. Then you can just put your camera on bravely. Oh, wait, there's Moshe Schur. He's a boy. Oh, but I've known him for a long time, so we'll give him an honorary credit. Hey, that's so cute. Okay, let's just relax. He's covering himself. That's good. Okay, so we were saying, okay, now, so the top of 95, which is another subheading, the error of bypassing separation. So now we're going to find out this whole business, what is separation and why we don't want to bypass that, which is, it's many things. One of it is, as we said, was being able to say what was, which is a big one. Clearly then, of all three stages, hachna'ah, hamtaka, havdalah, hamtaka, submission, separation, and sweetening, the stage in which the conventional version is most explicitly unlike its Hasidic counterpart is the stage of separation. So separation is a big deal. I just noticed we have 45 people from all around the world participating. This is so exciting. Baruch Hashem, so wonderful. Conventional psychology, which is based on human intellect, rather than on the divine wisdom of the Torah, and the divine wisdom of the Torah and its absolute definitions of right and wrong, cannot grasp the real dividing line between good and evil. This is why conventional psychotherapy sees no value in ignoring anxiety. In its eyes, there is no absolute good to be revealed by doing so. So what's what he's saying from this chapter? The Torah does say it has definitions of right and wrong. It's quite a shock when one comes from, because you can get get away with a lot in other schools of thought. But here we have, oh no, absolute definitions of right and wrong. It's quite shocking. This is a classic example of the common human failing of seeking to skip directly from submission to sweetening without undergoing the intermediate prerequisite stage of separation. This mistake is common not only in the conventional context, but also among Torah-oriented individuals. I think this is an important footnote, footnote 3. So we're going to move to the footnote section. I'm going to tell you the page number. Here we go, 171 if you have the book. This is an important footnote. We're going to go over it slowly. I'll give everyone a moment to collect their footnote. Okay. The desire to sweeten reality immediately without separating or subduing first recalls the sin of those Jews who attempted to proceed towards the promised land even after Hashem had told them that they were sentenced to wander for 40 years in the desert. Everyone remembers this story. They thought, nope, I think we want to go right now. Hashem warned them that God would not be with them, and indeed they were forthwith defeated in battle by the enemy nation opposing their way. Their impetuosity is the root of most sins described in the Torah, even at times those of great and holy individuals, being impetuous. The psychological drive to push incautiously toward the end, an existential lack of patience, originates in the same inability to deal with evil that motivates people to repress their inner evil back into their subconscious. Rather than looking at it and doing tshuva, don't push it back into the subconscious. An existential lack of patience. And this comes up again, this idea. So being impetuous is an existential lack of patience. So patience is a lovely quality, isn't it? Staying calm and patient, not getting worked up. Okay, so let's finish this idea. So to push the evil back into there. So we don't want to push it back into our subconscious. We want to be honest about it. We want to look at it and we want to see how to deal with it, how to refine it. We don't want to have this unrectified subconscious, because we spoke about how all our thoughts, all those annoying thoughts that we have to put effort into not following, come from our unrectified subconscious. So there has to be a time of looking at it and be up from an objective way, from a place of separation, and seeing what we need to clean up. Okay. When people feel threatened by the evil within them, they feel pressured to repress it and thus avoid the separation process, or pretend it does not exist, and therefore indulge in it as if it were already sweetened. To pretend it doesn't exist and indulge in it. Something to be aware of. So separation of the three stages can't be skipped. Separation is a lot of different, with one level, it's the ability to say what was. You know, people did that. You know, there were people that came out of the Shoah and they were able to get married and have families. There was a level, and other people, it was very hard. It was very hard not to wake up screaming. I mean, what was can take a lot of effort. What was. But it's an important concept to know about what was, right? Because we want to be able to get a handle on it. So that is the middle stage. So it's two things we're talking about in separation. So we can go back to page 95. But the two ideas we've been talking about is separation, was that what was, and also being able to identify with the divine soul and objectively look at our animal soul. It's fascinating. Make empirical discoveries. My animal soul. It could be very cute. It could be a cute animal soul, but no doubt it needs a tikkun. It probably needs to be a little refinement, right? Okay. So this is, so we did the footnote. Okay, so the temptation to do this, for in the middle of page 95, the temptation to do this arises from the fact that there is a type of sweetening in the submission stage itself, not to be confused with the subphase we have identified above as sweetening within submission. This is a little technical, albeit in a subdued form. Now it's, okay. The force of the ego is so pervasive in the human psyche that as soon as we begin to wean ourselves of our self-centeredness, we are consciously or subconsciously struck by our oneness with every element of creation. This perception sweetens reality and changes the individual's attitude toward the rest of creation from one of exploitation to one of concern, respect, or perhaps even love. L'chaim. So to wean ourselves of our self-centeredness, is being struck with our oneness with every element of creation. Now that sounds like a good thing, but there is a problem. So I think we have time to look at the problem. The inherent problem here is that this revelation may result in an anarchy of values that can eventually lead to absurd and even destructive conclusions. It is all well and good to aspire to be at one with creation, but do we really want to be at one with, turning the page, starvation, war, disease, oppression, cruelty, brute force, terrorism, substance abuse, pornography, emptiness, and boredom, ? Without a clear-cut means of drawing boundaries, these aspects of life can claim legitimacy along with the rest. Separation of good and evil is therefore necessary to make this nascent sweetening real. Throughout history, this has been the fundamental and fatal error of all attempts to rectify reality, impel society toward utopia, or hasten the advent of Mashiach. This not wanting to have this separation of good and evil. I mean, this is what happened, this Shabtai Tzvi. He thought that he was Mashiach and now everyone can do whatever they wanted, that everything was permissible. A sweetening, but he didn't go through the separation. He didn't go through this. The separation can happen. We have to be able to separate good from evil. And just to review is the last idea. We've spoken about this many times, but we haven't gotten up to the actual page in the book where it occurs. But I think it's so important that even I think I'm repeating it every week. I'm going to say it again. When we talk about the separation of good from evil, so there's 3 levels of evil that Rav Yitzchak describes. There's what the Torah says is evil and our taiva to do it, our wanting to do it. That one always gets a smile out of me. It's so tough. The Torah says, you can't do it, and I want to do it. Do you know what I mean? I find it so annoying. So that's one level of evil. The next level is more personal. It's my psychological blocks that keep me from fulfilling my shlichus. I'm supposed to be a conduit of love and light. We're all supposed to be conduits of love and light. And then we get caught up in like not liking people. So another, and having like blocks, psychological blocks that my mother didn't like, her mother, or whatever the case may be, those psychological blocks, that's personal. The third level is the most interesting. The third level of evil is whatever embitters our life. And whatever embitters our life, we have to sweeten. We have to sweeten because that's evil. It's a personal evil. And that's why we spoke about last week's Tanya Chitas in the Zohar, when it mentions the title of our book, Transforming Darkness into Light. It says transforming bitterness into sweetness.